Welcome to Compose Yourself, the podcast where academic writing meets self-discovery for the students at the Chicago School.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Cindy.
Whether you're crafting your first essay or refining your voice as a writer, we're here to guide you through the art of composition.
From brainstorming to final drafts, we'll break down the tools and techniques to help you think critically, write effectively, and express yourself with confidence.
So, grab a pen, open your mind, and
compose yourself.
Welcome to the Module 6 podcast. This week, we will briefly talk about peer review and what to do with feedback as our students continue to revise their research paper rough drafts. Then, we're going to end by doing something a little fun and look at what not to do in presentations. So, the first thing is that our students have submitted their rough drafts of the research paper and they're engaging in peer review on the discussion. Cindy, do you have any advice about, if when you are put in a position to give feedback, what do you do? What do you look for?
I think the best thing you can do first is sort of just read the whole thing without giving any feedback, right? Like start with just taking it in. So when I give feedback in the Office of Student Writing and Learning, the first thing I try to do is read the paper. Even if I'm not, like super detailed reading, I'm kind of skimming through, getting a feel for the structure, what's the topic, what's their thesis. Getting a general idea first gives me like a framework, I think, to think about those higher order things. So how is it organized? Does it seem to make sense the way it's organized? Those kinds of things. So I try to read it first before I offer feedback. And then I think it's helpful to think about what do you think went well? So does the paper have a thesis? Is it pretty clear the way it's organized? As a reader, can you tell what's being cited? So I try to look and see what's working well, because then I can take that off my radar. I don't need to think about that when I'm offering some assistance. So those are the things I like to do first before I offer feedback. Doing that first read through can also give you a clue as to what's going to jump out that needs to be worked on most, because that thing
Right.
can you'll see it continually throughout the paper. It might be distracting. What distracts you when you're reading it? That's a good thing to focus on giving feedback on.
I like that. And I would encourage our students, if you see something going well, point it out. Don't go overboard. I think it's just a human tendency to want to only say nice things because writing is so personal and intimate. So don't go overboard. We all benefit from that constructive criticism, but then don't go overboard in that direction. Like if something's going well, I want to know. Say
Hmm.
like you do a fantastic job with your transitions. It's so easy to follow your train of thought. That benefits me because that primes my brain to say, oh, now that I'm revising and continuing to write, keep doing this. This
Mm.
works well. So I really like that.
I think it's also helpful when you tell someone what's going well, then they also get a feeling of, okay, so when they tell me what isn't going well, it doesn't mean my whole paper is bad. It just
Right.
means I have areas to work on. What I think students sometimes struggle with is feeling that they have the agency or expertise to tell another person what is going well in their paper. Many of my students don't feel super confident as academic writers. So when we ask them to give peer review, they're like, why? I'm struggling to write my own paper. I don't feel like it's going well for me. What can I possibly offer this other person? And I would say that is a completely false way of thinking, because you're a reader.
Right.
If you're a
Right.
reader, you have something to offer, because if you can't clearly understand what they're going after,
Mhm.
what the topic is, why it's organized this way, what's the argument, if you can't understand those things, that's helpful information for them that you as a reader are struggling to follow the organization, or you as a reader are struggling to understand where they're getting their information. Um, you can notice those things as a reader, even if you're not entirely sure how to do it perfectly as a writer. I
Right.
think following your instincts, noticing what distracts you when you're reading someone else's paper are really good ways to help that person address those concerns in their own paper.
I fully agree. And, that makes me also think about this concept of higher versus lower order concerns, because, very briefly, the higher order concerns would be those things like organization and structure, use of transitions, whereas the lower order things is, oh, you added two these here, or you misspelled this word. And sometimes those lower order can be distracting. So I've also noticed this propensity in the past for students to only want to point out the lower order concerns. Why do you think that's not as beneficial?
Well, I think that's a really understandable temptation because those things can be really distracting when we're trying
Right.
to get to their ideas. I think one reason I don't focus so much on those is because we have tools to help you with lower order concerns like spelling, punctuation, grammar. The editor function in Word can help you with all of those things. Grammarly can help you with those things. I'm always going to say turn off the generative function in Grammarly.
Yep.
Gonna have to throw that in there. But use those tools. None, I mean, aren't we all heavily dependent on spell check at this point? It's okay.
Hmm.
So lower order concerns, if we're talking about sentence level grammar type things, I think use the tools available to you that help automate that process. So those things I don't put a lot of focus on. I do
Right.
think higher order concerns are really helpful if you focus on those. So, can you follow the pattern of the logical progression of what they're talking about? Does it make sense? Can you understand how the literature review is put together? Are there themes? Can you identify them? You know, those kinds of things as a reader, are you oriented in what's happening? That's what's helpful to find out because higher order concerns are really where your paper either comes together and it clicks for the reader or it really doesn't. And there
Right.
aren't great tools out there that are ethical to use in an academic space that can fix that for you. You really do need a human reader and your own critical engagement.
Which honestly, to me, when I've gotten feedback in the past, has been the most beneficial, those higher order concerns, because kind of like we've been talking about for a while, I need to know, I know somebody is reading this. It makes sense in my mind. So if I'm going back, revising, cleaning up, and editing my writing, if somebody doesn't point out that they can't follow my train of thought, I'm not going to detect that because it's my train of thought, right? Like, of course it makes sense to me. It's in my head. But so I love seeing, I benefit the most from that higher order feedback because it helps me make sure that my argument is solid, that it's structured well, that point A connects to point B, connects to point C, so on and so forth. What do you benefit from feedback?
Well, I recently just got some feedback from a fellow specialist at the Office of Student Writing and Learning, and it was super helpful to me because I don't need a lot of feedback on lower order concerns. I mean, I'm a confident writer. I've been doing this for a good number of years now.
Wow.
So I don't need a lot of help with those concerns, but I was trying to connect concepts that were kind of new to me. So I wouldn't call myself super well versed in these concepts, but I've been doing some research and I'm trying to make an argument that they're supporting this concept that I was writing about. And I wasn't positive that I was making those connections come through well, that what I was thinking about was translating itself onto the page so that a reader could understand. So getting that feedback from a reader is so vital, especially if you're still making some connections yourself and you're really trying to think through a topic. I always say I know what I think I said, but a reader knows what I actually said. So
That's
it
great.
helps to have someone read it and tell you, yes, I understand how these two concepts clearly connect. Yes, I understand how this article that you read and this article that you read come together to support the point that you were trying to make. That is, that's the key. That's what you can get from a reader that you cannot give yourself. So I think that can be the most help.
Right. I mean, so then I guess to sum up this whole topic, we have been talking about a few different tools, right? We've mentioned for those lower order concerns using things like Grammarly without the AI or Microsoft Editor. For some of the higher order concerns, the peer review that our students are doing, the writing center. To kind of sum it all up, do you have any final pieces of advice about maybe tools or editing strategies that could benefit our students?
The number one strategy for revision that I think is helpful to students is to do what's called sort of a reverse outline. So a reverse outline is just looking at the paper, see if you can identify the thesis statement. Where's the statement, the sentence that tells you what this paper is going to explore and sort of how. Um, you take that and you sort of, if you're looking at it on paper, it's easier to describe because I always just like write it over
In
in the
margins.
margin. But you can also highlight it if you're, looking at a digital copy or something like that. And then I like to look at the first sentence of every single paragraph. The first sentence of every paragraph, which, our students will know because they're going to look at the meal, they're going to know that meal structure. Um, Looking at that first sentence is your topic sentence, your controlling idea for that paragraph. And if your sentences don't all focus on that controlling idea, then that's going to be confusing for your reader.
Right.
So I like to take that first sentence, look at it. What would a reader expect this paragraph to focus on? If it doesn't do that, then you might need to move some content somewhere else to another paragraph. You might need to create another paragraph. But looking at that detail, like going through the whole paper, every topic sentence for new paragraphs, does that paragraph focus on that controlling idea or not? And making revision from there, I think is the most helpful.
I think that is such great advice because, I think not only is it beneficial at the paragraph level, but it's beneficial on overall as well. I mean, the number one piece of advice I've got in the past from students or from Comp 2 is they say, I really need help with my flow
Yeah.
in writing. And I love the idea of a reverse outline because, imagine writing is a journey. You're taking your reader on a journey. So imagine I say, hey, I'm going from here in Seattle to New York City. Um, One would expect that there's a process that you're moving through. But if I'm telling you the story and I say, well, I was down in Albuquerque, Japan was really, really fun. So anyway, back in Kansas City, I like if I'm bouncing all around, it'll be really hard for my reader to know, wait, how did you get from
Right.
here to there? So you could see that with the reverse outline as well, right? You can see, okay, I've started with my thesis. Here's my beginning point. And now I know where I want to go. Do each of those topic sentences, is there a story being told? Is there a journey? Or am I just bouncing around? Um,
Yes.
so I think that's excellent, excellent advice. All right, you ready to have some fun?
Yes, I'm ready. This is such a fun thing to look at. Well, I
I
mean, we think it's fun, right?
So while you are you going to pull it up?
Yes, I will pull it up. Um, so we're going to be looking at the APA's sort of advice on how to create PowerPoint slide decks because our students are going to be creating them for their read track presentations to share with the class. So um, this is called quite possibly the world's worst PowerPoint presentation ever. And I'm so excited because we get to like talk through why it's so terrible. Um,
Oh, let's go.
I
Go ahead.
should also say, like, if you've ever done any of these things, like, no shade being thrown. We have all done these things, which is why it was so funny to me when we found
Right.
this, was because, oh yeah, I get this. Can you see
I've
my
been
screen?
there. I can,
Okay,
yes.
good. Okay, so first thing that jumps out to me, the title is so long.
Oh my goodness.
It's so long. The whole slide is just words, and there's a title and a subtitle, and they're both very long.
Which
So
usually is the introduction, right? Like this would be, hi, I'm blah blah blah. Here's what I'm talking about. I'm not focusing on that speaker.
No,
Not at all.
I'm
Trying to
trying
figure
to
out what is
read
this
this long
title.
title. That's my first and favorite advice to give to students. When you're doing a PowerPoint presentation and you're going to be using it to talk, like you're going to be recording yourself talking through your presentation, the slide itself is not for you. It's for your
Right.
audience. And I mean, it gives them like an idea of what your high points, your most important points will be. It gives maybe a visual. It helps them to focus on what you're talking about for that slide. But you don't want your PowerPoint slide to compete with you for the
No.
audience's attention, right? Like right now, I would be it would be competing because I'm trying to read this and listen to the speaker, right?
Mm-hmm. This is oof.
Okay, so let's say this
Ouch.
is the next slide. What do you notice?
Exactly what I wouldn't be able to focus. I would be sitting here and I'm not listening to what the speaker says because I'm trying to read all of this information.
Right. And if you're
That
very
is
far away from it, like let's say you're in an
too
actual
much.
presentation room or something, or even on Zoom, when there's a lot of text on the slide, it's hard for me to see it. Like you're going to see a lot of people doing this because
Uh-huh.
they're trying to get close enough to the screen to read what's on that slide.
You know what? Actually, I want to bring up real fast. I'm glad you mentioned that. There is an equity component to a lot of this as well. That, many people who are out here viewing this, if there's this much information on the slide, then you are not reaching out to audiences who may have different visual impairments,
Or
or
how fast they
whatever
can
it may
read.
be. Right. Different learning styles, different language levels of competency.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's a big, big problem in and of itself that you would want to avoid, even at work. Even if I'm presenting just to my colleagues, I would want to keep it short, keep it simple, keep the text size a little bigger,
Yes.
but not too big.
I also noticed there's no citation on this slide, which the APA doesn't necessarily give a guideline, official guidelines for citing on slides, but so I'll just speak to like best practice in academic spaces. What I do and what I see other professionals do in academic spaces is, put that in-text citation maybe down here in the corner
Yeah.
so that the reader knows that you've got a references slide. Your last slide in the deck needs to be a references list, just like on your paper. Um, you and then you're just kind of sending the reader saying, if you go look at Roberts, 2025 on the references slide, you can go and
Right.
read about this. So you don't need to necessarily like put them after every statement. Like if all of the information from this slide is paraphrased from that one source, then dropping it down here in the corner works.
I agree.
Again, do not
Good
put
idea.
all of this on the slide. Um, but you might have bullet points and then have that citation down in the corner. Okay. What do you notice about this slide?
That hurts my eyes. I can barely read that. Wow. I that is not a good color combination. I mean, in my in-person classes, we had a little more time and we briefly talked about color theory, and how to use those different like complementary colors, et cetera, to be visually and aesthetically appealing.
Hmm.
This is not visually or aesthetically appealing. I struggle to read what is up there. And that's not to mention people who might have different forms of color blindness, that might not even be able to read this at all.
Which is it's kind of a disappointment because this slide actually isn't bad as far as what is on the slide. It's got some pretty large font. The bullets are nice. You can tell that the speaker could speak at some length about these points, maybe give some more
Right.
context, but they haven't overloaded the slide. They've got a picture of what they're talking about. As a slide, this actually works much better than the previous ones, but because the color background isn't in high enough contrast with the font color, then, you really get some problematic viewing for the audience. So I agree, the color is a little bit difficult, but the slide content is actually not bad.
Right. Absolutely. And this is stuff that the the template, the designer features, even AI can kind of help with. Like they've been trained by professionals to not make mistakes like this.
Correct. So using that designer function in PowerPoint is always a nice one. Okay. What about this one? Whoops,
Wow.
I'm having trouble getting it to be exactly where I want it to be. So let me try these little slidey options. There we go.
I am
What
back
are your
in high
thoughts?
school.
I'm back in 1992 with
Mhm,
this.
mhm. Wow.
Clip art.
Wow. I mean, it's too much. It is way, like when we were back and we were talking about topics and then staying organized within the paragraph level, it's almost like you could think of slides as paragraphs. There needs to be some kind of organization, some kind of theme, because instead of, the words, I'm being directed by the visuals.
Yeah, my eyes are darting all over this slide, and I
Right.
want to know what this is. What is this?
I don't even.
Okay, so that's all I can see now. That's all I can see. I don't know what this like if I'm just looking at this image trying to figure out what it's about, there's no way I'm even registering that this is about buying a suit because the actual title of this
Buying a new
presentation is
suit.
way up here and it's not the focal point,
No, the focal point.
especially when I'm
Welcome.
not sure what this is. So it's just too much.
Which, and there are instances I get where you may be comparing data, you're showing multiple graphs or charts, then just have multiple slides.
Right. Yes, I agree.
I mean, this is visual overload.
Do not over clip art your slides, I think is the theme
Mm.
here. Okay, whoops. This
Oh, and
one
this
we
one,
can't show them because we didn't play the presentation, but imagine, let me cast the vision for you.
picture.
Imagine that the speaker has to click every time and one of these lines of text comes shooting in from the side and then maybe this one comes flying up from the bottom. And there's just a lot going on where things are sliding in and out of the slide. So they call those are those transitions in PowerPoint?
Transitions between the slides and
I think there's
the
slide
animation. Yeah.
animation. I find that extremely distracting as an audience and honestly as a presenter. If I give a presentation, you will never ever see me use transitions or animations because
Ever.
I find them overwhelming. I'm not saying you can't ever use them. I think you need to be very cautious that they have a function. So, like, let's say
Right.
you're presenting and you want to ask the audience a certain group of questions, then maybe you only want them to see one question at a time, or you want them to see options coming in one at a time, or you ask a question on the slide and then you want the answer to come floating in after. You don't want them to see it at the same time as the question.
Right. Right.
Fine. Those can be helpful animations, but I would say if your animations are not purposeful, don't use them.
I agree. Yeah. It's 2025, not 1995.
Although that would be fun. Okay, so
I think this one's just a simple reminder that just like there's a writing process, that there should be a process to this. Because I've seen this, I've even had some of my colleagues at like professional development meetings. They rush through, they make a presentation. It's meant to have a clip of something,
or they
a video,
embed a video and it doesn't
and then
work.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. So always just double, triple check, do
Yeah.
a few
Use
run
that
throughs.
presenter mode. Make sure
Yep.
that that thing is going to play, that it's going to show up, that the link is going to work, whatever, if you're putting those kinds of things in. So this last slide here is just saying what we just said. Check. Some things could go wrong. Check your presentation.
Always.
Before you start recording yourself, make sure that you do that presenter mode in PowerPoint or whatever tool you're using, and then go through it and make sure that everything that's supposed to work is working.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna stop sharing.
So I think that it's a fun way to look at it. And I know we went a little longer today, but PowerPoints and presentations, these are a very visual thing. So I hope that our students kind of benefited from seeing some of these what not to do's. Um,
Yeah,
but honestly, I think it's going to be fine. I feel like so long as there is that deliberate intention, as long as everybody's really thinking about what they're going to do a good job.
I think so too.
All right. Well, next week is our final podcast episode for English 200. Yay! We're almost there.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking about how we can pull everything together from what we've learned. We're going to reflect upon what, we've all been going through in this course. And then finally, we're going to really think about how can our students apply all of this knowledge? This is their last English course, last writing course, but how can they apply that going forward?
Sounds great. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Compose Yourself.
Remember, writing is a process, and every word you write brings you closer to becoming the writer you want to be.
We hope you enjoyed today's discussion and that it makes clearer the topics you're exploring in this course. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to your instructor.
Until next time, keep thinking critically
And always compose yourself.